Jeff, welcome to the show, man.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, I'm really excited to dive into your story, your journey. I myself, I host my own live event every single year, and it's a massive undertaking. And you do events and parties at scale for some of the biggest organizations, celebrities, you name SNL, you do all these crazy things. But where I want to start is like, there's not I haven't met a kid, at least, who said, I want to grow up and be a party planner for the biggest names in the world. How did it start for you? How did all of this really begin for you? Because it's something that not many people do.
So just to just to explain this, I never in my wildest growing up, this was the farthest thing from my mind at at all. But what happened was when I was in college, one night I'm online at a nightclub with me and just some of my guy friends, and we're kind of just online waiting and waiting. And all of a sudden, promoter that we know from back home walks up. What's the line with all these girls and whatnot? And my friend turns to me and says, Jeff, that's what we got to do. We got to become promoters and start throwing parties. Now, let me just preface this by saying I'm an introvert. So my initial reaction was, no thanks. I'm not interested. He is an extrovert. So he's like, no, we got to do this. We got to do this. So for weeks and weeks and weeks, he would be pressing me, Jeff, we got to do this. We're going to make a lot of money. We're going to meet all these girls. It's going to be like literally every single time I would see him, he would be pressing me to do this. So finally, after maybe a month, I said, look, I will give this one shot. I will call my sister, see if she knows any promoters or anybody in the nightclub world, and I'll try it once. If it goes well, we'll do it again. If it doesn't, leave me the fuck alone. Just leave me alone. So he says, okay, fine. So we connected with a promoter through my sister, and we were inviting everybody down. I mean, now this is going back to the days of there's no Instagram, there's no Facebook. This is like early college for me.
Yeah.
And we're just making calls and calls and calls. And my friend slash business partner, he was calling people from tennis camp he hadn't seen in like 10 years. So we're just two kids like inviting all the people that we know to come to this biggest party of the year kind of thing. And all these people show up. It's mayhem outside. I go up to the door to try to get in, or I should say, thinking that I'm going to get right in. And the bouncer says to me, I need you to show me your ID. Now, I'm underage at the time.
Oh gosh.
Yeah. So I show an ID that, well, wasn't me, but I would use it all the time to get into bars and clubs. It always worked.
Yeah.
Bouncer looks at the ID and goes, this isn't you.
Oh,
So I was like, I
like it's my
pleading my
party.
case. Yeah, I'm like, it's my party. I'm pleading my case, and he is not having it. So my partner went inside. He is going off, like, ranting and raving and raising hell. My partner and I busted our butts to, fill this place, and he's going crazy. And finally, they just said, look, okay, we'll let him in, but he can't drink. So I said, okay, no problem. I don't have to drink. No problem. I get in, and a lot of the people that we invited didn't get in, but the people that did had a really great time. And that's when I kind of knew like, hey, all right, you know what? This situation with the venue that we're working the party at is not really that great, but people that got in had a really great time. It's a really great experience. So I said to him, let's try this one more time. Oh, and mind you, we didn't get paid.
Oh, geez.
Yeah, that's a whole another thing. They didn't count all of our people and it was a whole whatever, but it happens. But I connected with another promoter that was much better to us, treated us with the respect that we deserved, and taught us the ropes. It gave us the rope that we needed, the leverage that we needed to learn the ropes and continue learning the business. So from there, I just started to throw my own parties, started to throw events and nightclubs and restaurants, and the rest is history. I just continued on and continued building.
Yeah, so hearing what you said, like you almost fell in love with the idea that I made these, like I did something that made these people feel good. They had a great time.
Yeah.
Is that still your pull to this day? Like you're like I get to create these
Yes.
experiences for people, right? Talk a little bit about
Yes.
how do you, whether it's a dinner party or an event or something at a party at a nightclub, like what are the important pieces to create that atmosphere where you know for sure before the party even starts that everybody's going to have a good time?
Well, there's a couple of factors that you always have to have on point. Number one is that you have to have attentive staff because the staff has to really be on point. The music has to be good because at the end of the day, people are coming to have a fun time.
Yeah.
They're there to have fun, regardless of whether they're having one drink or no drinks or lots of drinks or lots of food or whatever. They're there to enjoy themselves. And nothing is better than great music. So you have the music on point, you have the staff on point, personalization, and great food and drinks, and a great ambiance, and
Yeah.
an eclectic mix of people that they can mix and have a good time. That's where it is.
So when you're planning these, obviously I'm not in that world, right? I'm not in the party promoter world. Like how do you get control of or keep under wraps like who's coming? Like as you said you have to have an eclectic group of people, but eclectic group of people isn't always the best thing, right? You have to make sure they're going to be able to meld together. Is there a way you can kind of, I don't want to use the word control, but kind of control, the types of people getting in so you know that you have a great time that isn't going to be disturbed, right? Making sure the mortal enemy of the person hosting doesn't get in or whatever the case might be.
So let's just separate two things. One is celebrity client wants to throw a party that's their people. So that's or a brand wants to throw a party or it's an after party for a movie screening or a record release or whatever the case. And it's only for their people. That's scenario one. So in that case scenario, it's just their people. So it's not so much about when I say eclectic mix, it just means that the people that are coming in are they feel comfortable to engage with each other.
Right, right.
So there's that. Now, if you're talking about something where we're hired to fill the room with more people, that's where it has to be the right people that are coming in. That comes with a curated guest list of people being invited and discrepancy at the door person knowing what they're doing
Yeah. Yeah. No, and
and
it's just
us being in communication with them. So there's two different avenues for that.
For sure. And because my brain is like, I imagine in your world, because you're the best of the best. Like if one thing goes wrong, that
Thank you.
hurts, your reputation, right? As you continue to work with these big names. So I want to talk a little bit about how you made the jump from promoting parties at nightclubs into working with big brands like the SNL after party. That doesn't just happen overnight, right? Like that's a gift of networking, persistence, all the thing. How did you make that leap and really start working with the bigger names in the business?
So these things kind of happen, they kind of overlap and they kind of happen organically. Meaning there are people that I met because I had the restaurants, because I had the nightlife part of it, where, and I also had developed the celebrity booking end of it, where kind of all worlds were meeting at the same time in similar time frames. So, for example, a friend of mine that I knew when I was consulting for one venue that used to work for the Mets, he, and again, this is a whole long story. I'm not going to go into the whole thing, but after a couple of trial and errors with SNL, well, not errors, but after some events with SNL that I'd already did, he called me up and said, "Hey, Jeff, my friends organize the SNL after parties or after parties, and would you like to work with them or talk to them?" And we just, again, hit it off the bat. They basically just said, "Look, we'll give you a couple of our parties. Let's see how it goes." We became pretty good friends. One party went to three parties, went to me doing most of them. But these things happen over time, and it was organically, and there were a lot of things that kind of just happened uh, on the other end that kind of just led to me getting more and more involved. So that's just case scenario for SNL. With other things, as an example, like the LA Dodgers. Well, one of my friends is the agent for a couple of the players. And when they want to organize their charity events and they need help, they will call me. So there's a lot of, but again, a lot of this sparks from whether it be restaurants, whether it be nightlife, whether it be my business partner Mitch Faulkner at 123 Talent. He's done a lot of celebrity golf tournaments. So like there's a lot of things that go on behind the scenes that we're a part of that you wouldn't know, like, hey, X actually turned to Y like 5, 10 years later.
Yeah.
You know what I
Yeah.
mean? So
For
there's a lot
sure.
of give and take in that in that aspect.
Yeah, so people ask me all the time, like, how do you? Because I'm kind of known in the independent podcast scene as like the guy who interviews big names, and I've been fortunate enough, and I've been doing it long enough for 9+ years that I've interviewed some really great people, and people are always like, how do you do it? How do you do it? And it's just a multitude of ways, right? Sometimes it is that, oh, I happen to run into Lauren at an event, and she introduces me to Kurt Angle, and now I get to sit down and talk to you, and who knows where else that will go, or it's just an Instagram DM and say, hey, I'd love to have you on the show, and then that person introduces me to the next person. I had one guy on my show, his name's Fabio Viviani. He's from Top Chef. He actually introduced me to 50 individual people, from Real Housewives of New Jersey and guys like Andy Frisella. And it was just like, this crazy thing, but it all starts with strong relationship building. And I want to talk to you a little bit about that, like the skill of building these strong relationships with people who get pulled in a million different directions. How are you able to cultivate those relationships? Are there specific things you do that allows that to really grow into working with them long term, and then them trusting you enough to say, hey, you should also work with my friend over here? Talk a little bit about your ability to do that.
So there's a couple of things to consider. Number one is the biggest thing is Do what you say you're going to do.
Mm.
Do what you say you're going to do. Keep to your word. When you have even one small interaction, keep to your word. That's number one. Number two is I build my relationships very organically, but I'm not also overbearing and annoying them either.
Yeah,
So there's a balance between Jeff is here, he's not here, but he's here, if that makes sense.
for sure.
So it's one of those things where sometimes those things lead to like, oh hey, uh, Jeff, my birthday is coming up. Can you put it together? Cool. Hey Jeff, I'm in town. I want to plan a dinner tomorrow night. Can you set it up? Sure, cool. There's myriad of ways, but also I keep very good relations with the talent and music and artists, managers and publicists and agents. So there's a whole there's a whole line of people behind these people. Their assistants, their attorneys, their stylists, their I mean, I could go on and on, but there's a myriad of people that I have great relationships with behind that. So it's a lot of relationship building with not just the talent, but their people. It's also, as I said, it turns from like, hey, I know him to hey, he's a friend
Yeah.
to, but also I don't ask. This is another thing. I don't ask talent to introduce me to other talent unless we're in the same room.
Yeah.
Like unless one person is hosting a dinner and they happen to have their friend there and they introduce me, like that kind of thing. But other than that, I don't ask because they don't like it's one of those things where they don't want to hear like you're trying to meet their friends to you know, they don't want to hear about that kind of stuff. And honestly, the way I look at it is I'd rather not even need to do that. I'd rather approach who I need to approach, build a relationship with who I need to build a relationship with, or who I want to, and keep it going like that. But I never say to somebody, hey, can you introduce me to another talent? Unless it's like, unless the person is a really, really close friend and we help each other out a lot and that kind of thing. But
Yeah.
very, very, very rarely will I ever ask that.
Yeah. I'm so glad you said that. Um, I have had I have friends who are like really good friends with Joe Rogan. And people are like, "Oh my God, just see if you can get on the show." I go, "First of all, I'm not interesting enough to be on the show. Second of all, I would never do that. Like, that's literally the connection where like that person would go, "Oh, you're just using me to get to Rogan." Like that's the feeling, right?
Yeah.
So how many people have said to me, "Oh, can you get Ed Milet on my show?" Or "Oh, can you get Gabby Bernstein on my show?" Or all these things. And I'm like, "No, it doesn't work that way. Like it just doesn't, go down that way." And I think, it comes from a standpoint of giving of yourself as much as possible, and the universe in a sense will repay you, right? Like you show up, you do the work, you do what you say you're going to do, and then they'll organically go, you should know this person, right? And then that leads to the next. Now, did you think when you started this, say you're 5 or 6 parties in now, that you'd be working for, doing work for the Dodgers and doing work for SNL? Like, what is when you take a moment and step back and look back at all you've built for yourself, like is there ever pinch me moments? Is there ever like, wow, I can't believe like I'm at the top of this craft?
No. No. And I'll explain this. So I I'm one of those people that it's one of those things where like I am grateful for what I have, but I don't take it for granted. And was I also don't look at it in the sense of like, oh, I met or worked with this celebrity, so I'm starstruck. I can't believe it. And I those thoughts don't go through my mind only for the reason that I'm not starstruck, number one. And number two is yes, back in the day, I would have never thought. That is 100%. I would have never thought that I'd be doing what I'm doing and all that kind of stuff. But I also try to keep a level head about it because at the end of the day, we're all human beings and
Yeah.
we're all just trying to succeed, right? And we're all just trying to do good things in the world. That's really what it boils down to.
Yeah. And I'm sure that helps your relationships too. Like I've built so many friendships with people that have been on the show and people are like, "Oh my gosh, I can't believe you hang out with them," or whatever. And my response is always like, they're just a human, right? Like I just treat them treat them like they're a human.
Yeah.
They do cool stuff, but they're still just a human. But that I'm sure that leads to you being able to actually build those relationships. If you got introduced to George Clooney and you were like, "Oh my God, you're George Clooney," he would have never hired you to work with him. You know what I mean? It's like that fanboy, take that out of the equation and show up and be a professional, right?
Well, they would never come to me to book anything or whatever. Yes. But ironically, and this is the funniest part, is that I would be personally, even though I'm friends with him, I would personally be more starstruck by Kurt Angle than I would be by George Clooney. That's the funniest part.
Yeah. It's the childhood hero stuff, right? Like it's like, oh, I watched you as a kid growing up, or you're my favorite actor as a kid growing up. Like that's so different than, as you're an adult, like whatever the case would be. But you mentioned Kurt Angle. I was certainly nervous going into the interview because you want to do a good job, right? You want to take care of him. You want to make sure that his story is getting told the way he wants, all those things. But dude, the second he came on, like there's something about him. Like it was like I wasn't nervous at all the second we started talking. Like how were you able to, is that still weird for you? Like being like you're close friends with him. Is that something that you're like, oh my God, I can't believe I'm hanging out with Kurt Angle all the time?
No, I mean, it's one of those things like when I met Kurt, when I met Chris Jericho, those in the beginning, that is kind of like a pinch me moment, if
Yeah.
that makes sense,
Yeah.
because it's kind of like, I was watching these guys tear the house down on Monday Night Raw and all these cool matches with Shawn Michaels and this one and that one. And yeah, in the beginning, like the first one or two times, maybe, but after that, it's like it's Kurt. It's my friend. It's my guy. Like
Yeah.
same thing with Chris. But in the beginning, yeah, but those are the kind of things that get me like, oh, wow, this is crazy, you know what I mean, kind of thing.
Yeah.
Whereas me working with Clooney, as much as he's one of my favorite actors, and there's a lot of other people in that category that I've worked with, it's not it's just not the same kind of thing.
Yeah. So where do you see all this going? Obviously, you've been at it since what, the early 2000s, right? So you've been doing this for 20 plus years. Where do you see it evolving? Is there a shift in your business that you see happening? Like I'm sure you're always a step ahead. Like where do you see this all going next?
We take one day at a time. We always have strategies for the future, but we take one day at a time. It's one relationship at a time. It's one event at a time. And simultaneously, while we're focusing on what we have presently and what we're working on, we are, of course, always looking to the future, looking how to, you know, reinvent and make everything more grandiose. But at the end of the day, all those things, the immediate focus always makes the future focus a lot brighter and a lot better. Because without the present, you don't get the future.
I love that, man. And that lends to you, living in gratitude, right? Like you can't be grateful if you're so worried about the future or worried about the past, right? It's really about being present. So I love that answer. So what do you think
Exactly.
looking back, if you could, and forgive me if you can't, right? But like looking back and you had to look at all the things that you've been able to build and put on for people, is there one that you're most proud of? Like, whoa, like we crushed this party. Everybody felt like they were had an amazing time. They went home going, I want to do that again. Like, was there one or two of parties that you put together where you're like, we crushed it?
I mean, there's so many that we've done that I've gotten rave reviews afterward, or I felt really, really good about. I mean, the ones that hit home to me are the ones that we did something really, really good for charity.
Mm,
So, for example, when we had Paul White, the Big Show, on Fan Room Live, and we brought on some sick kids that the charity normally brings them to wrestling shows, but at the time they couldn't travel because of COVID. Big Show, Paul White, he took 15 minutes of his time, hung out with the kid. The kid was over the moon, meeting his favorite wrestler. He signed his shirt off his back, donated it to the charity. Such a beautiful moment. Now, I took that video and, by the way, he signed the shirt, I should say.
yeah.
I took that video, I uploaded it, and a friend of mine who's a wrestling podcaster saw the video and he hit me up and said, "Hey Jeff, I saw what you did for the charity. I saw what you guys did for that kid. I actually have one world title belt from The Rock signed and one title belt signed by The Undertaker." He said to me, "I'm going to send one belt to the kid, one belt to the charity." It turns out that it was the kid's birthday a few weeks later. So
Wow.
we had the Rock's world title belt shipped to the UK for the kid. He got it on his birthday. He was over the moon, like so happy and excited. And then the charity auctioned off the Undertaker's world title belt and raised thousands of dollars from it. So
Wow.
in one shot, one video uploaded, it sparked so many great things out of it that we did on all fronts.
That's amazing. That's amazing. And, it must feel really, really good to be able to, have a huge part in all of that, right? And being able to give back. So I want to ask you a question that I ask every single person
Yeah,
on the show. Okay.
right in here. It really hits the heart,
Yeah. And,
truly.
and when you're able to work with these guys who have built a massive following like a Big Show or now Paul White and all the other guys, right? Like I love seeing them want to give back and love seeing them want to be a part of something greater because not everybody does that, even if they have the ability to do it. So it's really cool to
Yeah.
see. So I want to ask you a question that I ask everybody on the show. It's a two-part question. The first part is, what is your definition of success? And the second part is, what are three things you do every single day to ensure that success for yourself?
That's great, two great questions. The first question, I would say, well, number one, my definition of success is how do I make people feel?
Mm,
Meaning, are the clients saying, like, hey, we had this amazing experience? Have I put smiles on people's faces? Or I should say, does the work that I'm doing in the background put smiles on people's faces? Does it contribute to society? Are we doing things that are innovative? And once again, are the clients happy and resonating in what's happening? So that's my definition of success, is hearing that people are having a better time each and every time. That's my definition. It's not about financial success, because those things lead to financial success.
Right.
If that makes makes any sense to you.
It makes total sense, and it's 100% true. Like it goes back to what we were kind of talking about before, right? Like give without expectations, and the universe will reward you, and that happens whether it's in relationships, whether that's in money, whether that's in whatever. So I love that, man.
Yeah.
So what are three things you do every day to ensure that success for yourself?
I just I work on myself, meaning I try to keep a um, positive attitude always, always be grateful, always trying to work on different things to improve any kind of systems, anything personally, just to uh, project light on people pretty much. And I strategize. I just think like, hey, you know what? Oh, it's that person's birthday. You know what? Why don't I shoot them a text and wish them a happy birthday? Not necessarily. So here, just one other thing. If you notice, I don't really go online and wish celebrities happy birthday. I send the message to them,
Yeah.
because me wishing them a happy birthday, I mean, don't get me wrong, I occasionally do it, like on occasion. But for the most part, I want to show up for them at a personal level. And that's really it. I mean, I think a text or a DM or an email personally wishing them a happy birthday or happy Thanksgiving to them and their family or stuff like that, it's more meaningful than a post online wishing them a happy birthday.
Yeah, because that's it's funny. I do it on occasion too, but it's people that I've built like I'll do it with my best friend that nobody knows, and so if this guy's my friend too, I'll do it. I got to be super close with them to do it online. But if it's somebody who is like a newer acquaintance or whatever, it's always a text. Because I'm not
Yeah,
doing it for clout. I'm doing it because I think they're a good person and I like that they're in my life, right?
exactly.
Yeah, so I love that advice as well. So I wrap up every single interview with the same question, but before we get there, how do people find you, connect with you, book you, all the good things? Like, how do they get a hold of you?
My Instagram is at IE Group NYC. My other company, Fandom Live, is at Fandom Live on Instagram. My website for my company is iegny.com. And my and Fandom Live is fandomlive.com.
Well, actually, I did want I meant to talk about that after you mentioned it with the big show. Talk a little bit about Fan Room Live. I think it's a fascinating uh, concept. I love what you're doing with it. Where did the idea come from? And talk a little bit about that, just so people know what it is.
During the pandemic, right in the beginning, right in the heart of it, we're all bored, sitting at home, doing nothing, bored out of our minds. My business partner, Mitch Faulkner from 123 Talent, calls me up and he says, Jeff, we gotta do something. Let's get some of our athlete and wrestler friends online to meet their fans, teach some classes, do something. I said, hey, what about doing it for charity? What if they met their fans for charity? You know what? What if we also did it with celebrities? Oh, what a great idea. So we started making some calls. We called Cedric, the entertainer, and we lightly pitched it to him, just skeleton idea. And he listened and he said, I think you guys are onto something, but I think it could be, I think this could be go on way past the pandemic. Virtual isn't going anywhere.
Yeah.
And we could turn this into a brand. So we partnered up with Cedric, a couple months of brainstorming and going back and forth on ideas and all that kind of stuff, format and everything. And Fandom Live was born and we launched.
I love it. So it's like it's like a virtual meetup in a sense, right? Like they're able to now with it, are they able to interact and connect? Like what's the setup of it all?
Yeah. So the celebrity gets to meet all their fans one by one. However, all the fans that are logged in, they each get to watch each other. So it's a very up close and personal, very unique experience because one question that I might ask, let's just say if I'm a fan, you might have not thought of, and now you know the answer to, and now you feel like you're all that much closer. And it's like this really cool experiential experience.
Yeah, and I think that's a phenomenal idea. It gives people access they wouldn't have otherwise, and it helps everybody in the long run, man. So I love that. So like I said, I wrap up every single interview with the same question after I threw a different question in there. Since the show is called the Growth Now Movement, that question is: in your life, what has been your biggest moment of growth?
It's a it's an interesting one. I think that if we're talking about moments of growth, I think it's the I think it's the moment when the pandemic kind of was just about over and I wanted to dive more into business related stuff, expanding and focusing a little bit more on Fanroom Live, focusing more on restaurants, focusing more on booking celebrity talent at conventions and booking comedy shows and less on nightlife.
Mm,
Because what I realized is that as much as I want to keep one foot in nightlife for when it's needed, I don't, that's not my passion.
yeah.
It's just not. My passion is being on the back end. My passion is producing. My passion is planning. My passion is being creative. So I tapped into my creativity and it's given me a lot less um, anxiety, just in the sense of like, how that feeling when you're doing something that you just don't love it anymore,
Yeah.
but you kind of need to have it in your back pocket in a sense.
Yeah.
That's what I would say.
No, it's a great answer, and dude, thank you so much for coming on and sharing your story with my audience. I think you hit so many important things that people can learn from as far as building high level relationships and being really focused on what you're passionate about is super key. Because when you said, do you ever do that thing? You have that thing where you're like, you need to kind of do it just in case you're not making money over here or whatever. I feel that. I've done that.
Well, no. I just want to point one thing out. One thing out.
Yep.
It's not a matter of needing money. It's a matter of if clients need the nightlife access.
Yeah.
There's a huge difference. And that difference is what I was referring to because it's not necessarily that I would need to be in nightlife to make money. It's that where I'm making money with might need the nightlife. And that's a good position to be in. And that's a very sane, anxiety free position to be in.
I love it,
Is
man. Yeah, Jeff, thank you so much, dude. I thoroughly have enjoyed this conversation. It was an absolute honor meeting you and sitting down, and just thank you so much for what you do, man. Especially, talking about the charities and all that stuff. It's life changing. So thank you.
Thank you for having me on. This has been a lot of fun, man. Seriously.